Breaking news, Kwame Kilpatrick sentenced to 28 years in prison.
His fate for convictions on 24 counts of racketeering, bribery, extortion.
The judge calls Kilpatrick's corruption corrosive to the city. Now he'll be spending decades behind bars.
Did Kilpatrick save his best apology for last? Hear what he said in a tearful speech to the judge.
As far as public corruption goes, this is as heavy a sentence as any in history.
This is a very significant day in the history of Detroit. I think Judge Edmonds has sent a profound message that the people of Detroit will not tolerate public corruption.
Why prosecutors say the case against former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick was money well spent.
Live Team 7 coverage on what happened inside federal court and what's next for the former mayor of Detroit.
New at 5.
He's accused of violating a woman as she worked. Here's a look at the man. We'll tell you why police want to find him.
7 First Alert weather.
It has been impressively brilliant around here. I'll tell you how long it can last, whether or not we make it through the weekend.
You're watching 7 Action News, always taking action for you.
28 years in federal prison. That's the sentence the judge handed down to Kwame Kilpatrick to pay for his crimes against the city of Detroit.
And tonight we are taking action with Team 7 coverage of this breaking news story. We're laying out the sentence for you, former mayor's reaction, and analyzing what it all means. Let's begin live downtown with investigator Heather Catallo reporting on the final chapter in the book of Kwame Kilpatrick's corruption scandal.
Well, even though Kwame Kilpatrick started crying several times when he addressed the judge, he showed barely any emotion at all when she told him, "You're going to prison for 28 years." That way of business is over. We're done. We're moving forward. Those were the words of Judge Nancy Edmonds as she sentenced Kwame Kilpatrick to 28 years in federal prison, sending a strong message that public officials must be accountable. She called Kilpatrick's corruption in office corrosive to the city, saying, quote, "We lost transparency. We lost accountability during his 6 years as Detroit mayor." Judge Edmonds said the 43-year-old deserved a long prison sentence for his 24 convictions on racketeering, bribery, tax crimes, and other charges. Edmonds said other than today when Kilpatrick apologized, saying, quote, "I'm incredibly remorseful for any role I played. He hasn't shown much respect for the justice system." Federal prosecutors said this was one of the most significant corruption cases in the country, committed in one of the most vulnerable cities.
The amount of crime was astounding, and it had a huge impact on this city. But we hope for the city that this is the end of one chapter and on to a new one.
Speaking outside of the courtroom for the first time to reporters since the trial started, Assistant U.S. Attorneys Mark Chutko and Michael Bellotta praised the judge.
The judge paired the sentence to meet the crime, really. And my hope, I truly hope that every public official out there in our district who's even having the slightest inkling of crossing the line and betraying the public trust, that they paid close attention as to what went on in that courtroom today.
It's always bittersweet. A person's going to jail, but at the same time, justice was served today, and the system worked.
Kilpatrick lawyer Harold Gurewitz told Judge Edmonds that people convicted of war crimes have received sentences of 28 years. He called this sentence excessive and requested that the former mayor be moved to a federal prison in Texas.
It's hard for anyone, no matter what the length of time is that they're required to spend in custody, to be separated from the family. That's one of the most significant parts of punishment, is the separation from people who love them.
So here's the breakdown of how the judge handled the sentence. Some of the prison terms are going to be concurrent, and some she stacked on top of each other. Kilpatrick got 20 years for the RICO and extortion convictions. She gave him 7 years for all of the mail and wire fraud convictions, and then he got an additional year for the tax convictions. That's, of course, the grand total of 28 years, and then once he gets out of prison, he will have 3 years of supervised release. Reporting live at the federal courthouse in downtown Detroit, I'm Heather Catallo, 7 Action News. Back to you.
Heather, you covered this mayor for years. You've seen him in so many different lights throughout the years. What were your thoughts on the man that you saw in court today?
Honestly, he seemed beaten down. He spoke so softly to the judge, we could barely hear him at times, and he just seemed completely resigned to his fate at this point. It was a totally different person.
I bet. Thank you, Heather, so much.
Let's go to 7 Action News investigator Ross Jones. He's standing by now. Now, Ross, you were there for Kilpatrick's tearful apology, and it was certainly nothing but raw emotion, you would say.
I would agree with that, Chef. Good afternoon. Well, Kwame Kilpatrick may not be very good at them. He has certainly gotten used to offering apologies through the years, and today he offered maybe the most important of his life. Speaking in a barely audible voice and holding notes scrolled on a yellow notepad, Kwame Kilpatrick came as close to showing remorse as he ever has in a courtroom. I just want people to know that I'm incredibly remorseful for the condition of this city, for any role I've played in it, he said. The ex-mayor spoke in broad, general terms, never admitting guilt for any of the criminal counts he was convicted of. The closest he came to saying he did anything wrong was when he described conversations he had with Bobby Ferguson about bids for city work, saying they blurred the lines of propriety. Kilpatrick still maintained he never stole a dime from the city and said the assistant U.S. attorney who argued otherwise today was wrong. He talked about stealing, taking money from the citizens of Detroit, Kilpatrick said. "Wow, I've never done that, Your Honor." The ex-mayor's address to the judge meandered at times, and even he admitted it wasn't his best. He approached tears when he described to the judge how he was perceived by other Detroiters. "Everyone who ever worked with me never said I was arrogant, but everyone who saw me on TV said I was, even me when I saw myself on TV. I said, 'What are you doing, man?' I saw arrogance." For a minute, Kilpatrick approached the eloquence that reminded reporters just how he got elected to 2 terms as mayor. With his head down and his voice at almost a whisper, he said this: "I know a lot of jurors wanted closure for this city. I do too. I want the city to participate and focus on things other than me, a dead thing. It's over. I want the city to turn the page." So, on a day this dark for Kilpatrick, you might expect that his wife and his sons would be here by his side. And you'd be wrong. We'll tell you why ahead at 6. They were nowhere to be seen here in Detroit. We're live at Federal Court. I'm Ross Jones, 7 Action News.
Sounds like quite a change. Remember, this is a man who addressed the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
And today
Such promise at one point,
yeah.
right?
Well, Ross, lawyers for Bernard Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson were there in court today. Their sentencing did not happen today, so why were they there?
Well, in part, Jeff, it was for support, but mostly it was to try to get a sense of what arguments they will face. For Ferguson, he'll hear them tomorrow in his sentencing, and for Bernard Kilpatrick, he's sentenced a week from today. So in essence, it's kind of a sneak peek at what arguments the government will be making when they push for a lengthier sentence, so they can kind of get an idea of what they should argue on the other side.
Okay, Ross, thank you very much. Our Team 7 coverage continues right now with Simon Shaquette.
Yeah, Simon has for us what the U.S. attorney is telling about all of this.
The judge certainly sent a powerful message to the people of Detroit that this kind of betrayal of the public trust will not be tolerated. 28 years, a very, very powerful sentence, equal to the highest sentence ever handed out in a public corruption case, but appropriate for the kind of staggering corruption that we saw in this case. And you know, this case is not so much about punishing people for the past, but about shaping our future. In the future, with a message like this, it is very clear that public officials will be held accountable in the city of Detroit, and we hope that it will deter people from abusing their public office and encourage good and honest people to seek public office. As the judge said, when you have public corruption, it erodes the trust in government, and it has that corrosive effect of breeding cynicism and apathy. And we're hopeful that this powerful message will say the people of Detroit will not tolerate stealing from our citizens. I heard him apologize to the citizens of Detroit, but I also heard him deny stealing from the people of Detroit and deny shaking down the citizens of Detroit, which is in direct contradiction to what the jury found in this case. For those people who've worked so hard, our public servants, the agents, the prosecutors, and since September 30th, without pay under the government shutdown, continued to work endless nights, weekends, and time away from their family, it is just satisfying to see justice served. This is a very significant day in the history of Detroit. I think Judge Edmonds has sent a profound message that the people of Detroit will not tolerate public corruption.
Some very strong words from Prosecutor Barb McQuaid, and especially what sticks out in my mind is when she said this case was money well spent. Now, coming up at 6, we're going to hear from Detroiters and get their reaction to this profound and historic sentencing. For now, back to you.